An edible forest garden is an edible ecosystem modeled on the forest and other natural ecosystems. It produces food as well as ecosystem services like habitat and soil building and all the other good things that forests and other natural ecosystems do. Designing edible forest gardens using exclusively species native to the eastern forest region is a great and interesting challenge. It also provides an opportunity to showcase and evaluate our native flora. Finally, it's in line with the principle of permaculture and edible forest gardens to always start with native species first. So what are some of the species that we have to work with? An excellent example is the shagbark hickory. Grafted varieties are available with nuts that easily crack out of the shells, which can produce nuts for hundreds of years. The American persimmon is a fabulous and underutilized native fruit tree which tolerates wet, dry, and poor soils and produces excellent fruit with very little inputs. One of my favorite native fruits is the pawpaw. This shade-tolerant tree produces a creamy, delightful fruit in the fall that simply must be tasted to be believed. The edible forest garden is about more than just producing food. We also want to imitate the ecological relationships and functions found in a natural ecosystem. One of those functions that's especially important is nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixing plants are able to take atmospheric nitrogen and, through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their roots, convert it into a useful form of fertilizer. One of our finest native nitrogen fixing plants is false indigo, which is not only an excellent nitrogen fixer, but also quite a lovely ornamental when it's in flower. Clove currant is a delicious native shrub that produces very nice fruits and beautiful aromatic yellow flowers in spring. Another interesting native shrub are the mini juneberries or service berries, including this one, the running service berry, which is very low, spreads in all directions, and has very divine fruit. Of the many interesting vines we have to play with are the fox grape, which is the source of Concord grape, as well as farther south, the very delicious and pest and disease resistant muscadine grapes. Believe it or not, we also have an eastern native passion fruit called the maypop, which has wonderful edible fruit and also has very nice cooked greens as well. A nitrogen fixing vine with excellent food potential is the groundnut, which is essentially a native potato that fixes nitrogen. Another very interesting native nitrogen fixer is the thicket bean or wild bean, which is perennial, enjoys partial shade, and produces small edible dry beans, perhaps the size of a mung bean or a lentil. This species definitely needs some work to achieve its full potential, but can be crossed with regular beans and could be the basis of a new native perennial food crop. Interesting crops for shade include wood nettle, which, though it stings, is a very, very delicious cooked green and extremely nutritious, like its relative, the ordinary stinging nettle. Another fine crop for shade is ostrich fern, whose edible shoots, or fiddleheads, are very, very popular throughout the New England area. Here's a dual-purpose native species, giant Solomon seal. In the spring, it has very nice edible shoots, seen here. And when the plant is dormant, you can dig the very good size and reasonably good tasting tubers, which are used much like potatoes and oiled with some butter and salt you'd never know the difference. Ramps are a native wild leek and are absolutely one of the finest gourmet vegetables to be found anywhere in the world. It happens that they like moist, deciduous shade, which makes them a great choice for the understory of an edible forest garden. You can harvest the leaves, which are very nice eating, and also the very strong garlicky flavored bulbs. Another spring ephemeral species for full shade is toothwort. This native relative of wasabi has thin rhizomes with an absolutely delightful horseradish flavor, as well as watercress flavored leaves. Ground covers that you can't eat are great to have too. In this case, Waldsteinia is a wonderful evergreen, shade-tolerant, dense, running, low native ground cover. Simply ideal. Finally, it's important to incorporate mushrooms in the edible forest garden. This is the native Stropharia or winecap mushroom, which is very delicious and converts wood chips into soil and delicious mushrooms. Polycultures are the building blocks of edible forest gardens. A polyculture is a mixture of two or more species growing together with maximum cooperation and minimal competition. In this case, we have a lovely, almost all native polyculture. Butternut is our canopy tree, which is a beautiful native walnut. Beneath it, we have a hazelnut, which isn't native, but certainly could be and actually contains some native genes. We have an elderberry, which has edible fruit and also has flowers that attract beneficial insects, which is another key component of the edible forest garden and part of how we manage pest populations without having to spray. Finally, we have Jerusalem artichokes, which are a native tuber crop that also attract beneficial insects at a different time of the year. So we're making sure that important function is handled at different times of the year. Up next, we have another butternut-based polyculture, this time with fox grapes. This is the Concord variety of our native Vitis labrusca. The grapes are not so aggressive that they smother the walnut. The person who planted this waited until the walnut was good size before planting the grapes, and the one challenge is climbing up in there to get the grapes. It's certainly also possible to use pruning to keep them lower down where you want them to be. Here's one of my favorite examples. The overstory in this case is black locust, which is a native nitrogen-fixing tree that's providing excellent fertility and a fairly light shade. And beneath that we have pawpaw, which is a wonderful fruit-producing native. This is actually a wild association of these two plants that I observed on multiple occasions in Maryland, with the two of them growing together. Quite interesting. Let's take a look at a polyculture in the understory of a pawpaw. In this case, we have an early spring ephemeral ramps and toothwort that come up and die back, and as they're dying back, hog peanut, which is a native nitrogen-fixing ground cover that loves shade and has edible above and below ground beans, is filling in the space and providing a year-round cover, as well as an all-native polyculture where every component is edible. This is a polyculture built around the native beach plum. Beneath it we have native beneficial insect-attracting evergreen ground covers, including coreopsis and green and gold. And we have some native edible bulbs. We have ramps and we have camas, although this is the western and not the eastern camas, which I hope to get my hands on and replace it for in this polyculture in the future. Here's a shrub-based polyculture. We have the native sand cherry, which is a delicious and very underutilized native cherry, a very shrubby form. We have clove currant, again, with its very fragrant flowers and delicious berries. And as a ground cover, we have wild strawberries, and there are cultivated varieties available of our native wild strawberries, which serve as excellent ground covers as well as delicious fruit. Here we have elderberry attracting beneficial insects. We have groundnut fixing nitrogen and providing its edible tubers. And we have the native cow parsnip, which attracts beneficial insects and also has many edible parts. So those species are serving as a living trellis for the groundnut. The groundnut is fixing nitrogen, and the cow parsnip and the elderberry are both attracting beneficial insects, providing a pest control element. Our last polyculture example is Jerusalem artichoke with hog peanut. The Jerusalem artichokes grow very tall and would outcompete most of their possible polyculture companions. Hog peanut can handle the competition, can handle the shade, spreads on the ground, fixes nitrogen, and makes a very nice ground cover. Both of them can be dug up every year to eat, to harvest for consumption, and you'll never get all of them, so they'll come back every year no matter what you try and do. I hope you've enjoyed learning about these species, the polycultures they can be combined in, and their potential to create very interesting, edible, all-native ecosystems in our own backyards. If you'd like to learn more, I do have some upcoming workshops which you can attend to learn more about specifically all-native edible forest gardens and also more broadly the concept of food-producing polycultures of perennial multi-purpose plants. Visit my website to find the latest workshops.